Hannah, can you hear me?
Hello.
Just tell us what's been going on over there in Stockholm?
Yeah, well, it's the usual, Tony. Obviously, Bilderberg 2025 is well underway from the 12th to 15th of June. Today, Friday, actually we had a few people, a bit of movement Friday morning that we weren't expecting. Some people seemed to be going in and out. Some people were leaving, perhaps due to events in Tehran. But apart from that, it's business as usual. We've got a luxury hotel which is heavily locked down, like immense security, and 125 or so of the most influential people in the world.
Okay, so look, I mean, it's very central. It's very much in the city centre, isn't it? Without actually much of a cordon, in a great contrast to some of the venues which are out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, but don't forget they've had city centre venues before, like Ottawa, for example. And a lot of the sort of interest and attraction has kind of diminished recently in recent years. So maybe they just feel they can get away with it again.
No, that's a pity, because we had thousands of people here in Watford in 2013. So who's been coming in, who's in there and who's leaving? Be nice to think that some of them will walk out after last night's attack on Iran.
I don't think they were walking out so much as they probably had business to attend to. I don't think they were walking out. Alex Karp and Peter Thiel were in and out a lot this morning. I think Alex Karp left. I think Peter Thiel left too. Certainly Alex Karp's yoga mat left the building. That was packed and went off in a car and went round the corner. And also Peter Thiel was spotted leaving. But those guys go in and out a lot during the course of the conference. And you can always tell when they're about to go out because they always travel in cars with German plates. It's odd, but they do. But yeah, maybe they went to Tel Aviv after this morning's session shut at 12:30. They were out, and at least the yoga mat was, and off they went.
Okay, so what about the most interesting thing, it seems to me, on the agenda is we've actually got depopulation on this time.
I know, yes. Quite brazen. Do you think Albert Bourla was speaking at that session, maybe?
So who's he?
I don't know.
Who's he?
The CEO of Pfizer is in there. But I feel that after recent events, I just think they might have rejigged the agenda a bit and expanded the Middle East sessions a little bit. I think they really will be discussing that.
So anyway, how have you been getting photographs, and more importantly, I suppose, getting them into the international press?
The Swedish press are great. They're all here. It was on the front page of some of the national newspapers. There were some TV shows this morning, breakfast shows dedicated to it, which is unusual. But yeah, no, the national press, at least the British press, they're not interested. They really are not. The New York Times wasn't interested. It's not something we would normally cover unless something extraordinary happens. Daily Mail have covered it in the past. This year was like, it's not interesting to them. I was like, there's royals there, there's this, no one's interested.
Well, I mean,
no one's interested.
Well, they are, I'm afraid. It's just the press. I mean, the thing is, there's so many press in there. Maybe it's their bosses that are telling them not to be interested because they've got to keep
but look at the press, Tony. Look who's in there. The Economist, Zanny, Minton Meadows. You've got Bloomberg, John Micklethwaite, Anne Applebaum, also ostensibly a member of the press. Or a publisher or whatever. These people are not necessarily Gideon Rackman, Financial Times. Do you think they're the press, or do you think they are sort of like MI6? What do you think?
Well, what I think is that they're investors with nice jobs that want to keep their money and keep their jobs, and they just so happen to have a printing
Some of
press.
them might have nice jobs and got a good thing going, but press speaks.
So who have you actually seen? Who have you actually managed to get photos of?
Well, the usual. Eric Schmidt is always out and about. He quite glories in it. He really doesn't care about having his photo taken. He's a bit like Kissinger. In fact, he kind of slightly relishes it. Kissinger always used to love having his picture taken by us. Who else? The Greek Prime Minister left abruptly after the morning session. Got him. Got the Swedish Prime Minister coming in last night for the inaugural meal, which was almost a welcome feast for NATO, because obviously Sweden and Finland are joining NATO, and this is almost like a kind of celebration of that, this hosting of the event here in Stockholm. Who else have we got? Who haven't we got? They're all here. Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO. We've got, well, who I haven't got and who I would love to get is Wes Streeting, who is also on the list. I haven't got him.
Yes, well, we've just been talking about his restructuring of the health service and bringing in all sorts of new digital solutions. I'm not sure he's going to manage to get the waiting list round. But anyway, why do you think people like the Daily Mail or Financial Times should be covering this?
Well, I think we've got our elected representatives in here, hobnobbing with hedge fund moguls, AI bosses, you know, kind of shadowy intelligence chiefs. And it's just odd. There's no press oversight. There's no transparency. Obviously, they say it's all done under Chatham House rules, so no minutes are taken. There's no sort of transcripts of the discussions. It's a great big lobbying shop, to be honest. If you've got politicians in there with all these banks, hedge funds, and corporate CEOs, I mean, they're just sort of lambs to the slaughter, aren't they? They're in there for three days. They're cut off from all of their normal ties. It's an extremely intensive schedule. They're kind of really flattered and love-bombed in there. I mean, you have all the ingredients of a cult.
Well, yeah, especially since they don't like saying anything about what's going on. Now, I noticed a very sort of dark-looking Peter Thiel being followed along by Dan Dix at pressfortruth.ca yesterday. He actually looked like quite a troubled individual, quite someone who's actually got a lot of kind of secrets, dark secrets. He was looking like he really didn't want to be filmed, and quite a. So he's now quite a central figure. Back in the old days, I remember covering this in the early noughties. The main man seemed to be on the steering committee. At least one of the main people, anyway, was David Rockefeller, who was very convivial, very chatty, always looked quite relaxed. Thiel is a completely cut from a different cloth, isn't he?
He is, and he is very influential. He recruited Alex Karp, who came once in 2014 as just a participant, and then immediately went onto the steering committee. And also now the CEO of Anduril, another Thiel startup, has attended a couple of times, and maybe we'll see him on the steering committee. And yes, Thiel did look troubled during that confrontation, and he has changed a little bit. In Dresden, he did open up a bit, and he was talking, and he sort of wants to share his philosophical outlook a little bit. And in fact, we've seen that with the recent interview with the Hoover Institute, where he was talking about his philosophy and his theories based around the Antichrist. And how people would be asking for peace and safety, which is when the Antichrist would present itself. So, but yes, he looked troubled. He's not a happy man.
So, sorry, I didn't know about this. I mean, you know, talking about the Antichrist, we've also had we've just had this attack on Iran, the Iranians doing a kind of... I mean, this is the same night as Bilderberg convened, which I think several people...
Yeah, Friday the 13th, it all happened. Bilderberg met, and also apparently there's a very explosive astrological configuration on Sunday as well, so we shall see what happens Sunday. But yeah, Thiel is very interested in the concept of the Antichrist, and he believes that people will be driven to such a degree that they will be demanding peace and safety, and they will sort of, you know, worship whoever gives it to them and comply with whoever gives it to them, and that person or Sting will be the Antichrist. I don't know if that's AI. I don't know who that is. I don't know what that is. But Thiel is fascinated by this. So, yeah, he's a brooding figure. He really is. He's a Heathcliff figure, and he thinks about these things very deeply. He is troubled.
He is, isn't he? I mean, of course, the idea really here is that you have to create absolute chaos for somebody to come along and offer peace and safety to the world, don't you?
Yeah, so first of all, you create the chaos, and then first it's the Antichrist, and then later along comes the Messiah. And I don't know if this is the kind of the theological kind of foundation upon which the Bilderberg Group is basing their kind of outlook and philosophy. But yeah, that they're certainly thinking about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think David Rockefeller was into this sort of stuff. Possibly Kissinger was. He seemed to want to use it basically to accumulate wealth, money, resources, and more power. Yeah. But anyway, so he was an oil man who turned into a banker. What do you make of all of these tech giants that are there? I see even Spotify's turned up this time. Elon Musk is a regular, even though he's not on the list this year. He certainly could turn up on a video link. It's exactly his sort of event, isn't it?
Possibly. I don't think they would welcome the publicity Elon Musk would bring. I can't see it. I think he's a bit too much of a showman for them. They really love discretion. You know, they're not tweeting madly on drugs like Elon Musk is. They are discreet, and they think very carefully about the messages that they put out. Sorry, that's the ferry. I'm just here in front of the gates of the Grand Hotel right now, and we have ferries directly opposite the hotel. In fact, some are thinking that tomorrow night they will walk over to the water and take a boat to a nearby island for their usual Saturday night banquet. Apparently there's a nice castle on an island nearby, but we shall see. We shall see what they do. Okay, well, look,
we can't talk about Bilderberg without mentioning NATO, because Sweden has been on the fringes of NATO for decades, actually helping out quite a lot in the Baltic, the NATO countries, unofficially. And now it's formally there. It's almost as if this, like you say, is a big celebration of some sort of a new member of their club.
Well, I think it started off as a celebration. Certainly last night, the Prime Minister, Christensen, turned up, and I waited until 1 a.m. and I didn't see him leave, so they were chinking glasses well into the night. But obviously this morning, it's no longer a celebration, is it? It's sort of like, you know, it's business as usual, and it's deadly business. So Sweden is waking up to a hangover and realising what they've got themselves into as a part of NATO. Yeah, so Sweden and Finland were both welcomed into NATO, and Oscar Stenström, who was the main negotiator for this deal for these Scandinavian countries to join NATO, is actually the organizer of this Bilderberg conference this week. And he is now a Wallenberg employee. He works for he works for Jacob Wallenberg. And he's organising this entire massive conference.
Yeah, do you want to say something about the Wallenbergs? Because it's never in the press here, but these people basically dominate so much of the press and politics and finance in Sweden, don't they?
They dominate finance in Sweden, but also Europe. They are crazily wealthy. I think they're the second wealthiest family in Europe. They're certainly the wealthiest sort of family holdings in Bilderberg. The Wallenbergs have a perpetual family seat on the Swedish seat of the steering committee is always held by a Wallenberg. So it was Jacob Wallenberg, and now it's Marcus, his cousin. Yeah, they're crazily wealthy, and who knows how they amass their wealth. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, I can tell you, actually. Quite a lot of it was because they had very, very big oil interests and arms interests in World War II, and the two brothers in the war were on both sides. So they knew that as the war drew to an end, wherever the profits had been made from both sides could be drawn into a neutral country, such as Sweden or Switzerland. So that's basically how they. In fact, it's funny, but Shell did exactly the same thing. The petroleum company owned by the Dutch royal family, who are also big Bilderberg players. So in fact,
the King of the Netherlands is here this weekend as well. So
anyway, I can remember years ago, Hannah, talking to Klaus Kopf, who had confronted one of the participants of Bilderberg at his very own. He was at the German one in Dresden at his very own further education university college in Hamburg, and this guy said to him, where do you live? If you want to investigate Bilderberg, you want to investigate the people who are in charge of peace and war. Where do you live? So he was refused the permission to write his piece about the Bilderbergs. I had a confrontation with this guy. But anyway, he was adamant, someone that had actually been there behind closed doors, not being recorded, but just recounted by Klaus to me, that they do control peace and war. Do you think there's any credibility to that?
Well, I mean, look at who's there. It's NATO, and it's everything propping up the structure of NATO. And does NATO want peace? No. And have we got war? Yes. I mean, I think if these people in this building wanted peace, we would have peace tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right, yeah. No, we don't. Also, can you just say something about some of the atmosphere there and people who are covering it, Hannah?
Yeah, it's very subdued. It's not like former days. We've gone back to about maximum 10, steady Bilderberg watchers. There's a few pro-Palestinian protests about the place, and they have got interested when they can see, who's behind perhaps some of these conflicts, who created this instability in the region, who, is selling weapons perhaps to the Israelis, and propping up that regime. But it's quiet. It's quiet here. It's there's music. There's a local bar. We can hear the music. The ferries are coming and going. The sunlight is twinkling on the river. And yet, Tehran has been bombed, and Ukraine is in this state, and the Middle East is in this state, and and the people are inside talking about it.
I was just saying, it seems to me that the idea of these conferences, as much as anything, is to bring in some of these new people, like Streeting, and keep them under close observation. See, is this guy on side or not?
Yeah, to see if they're on side or not, to maybe sort of test the water. But also, and I think you've said this before, Tony, it's such a hothouse environment once they get in there. It's such a cult-like environment. But it's very hard for them not to, accept the consensus. This is a way of sort of creating consensus. And these new people, I mean, obviously occasionally they don't want to accept the consensus, and they're just never asked again. But if they're asked again, they're a clubbable individual, we can work with him, and they're flattered. They're flattered to be invited. It's special. They feel special. And, you've got the royals, you've got all of these big names, international names, supranational wealth, and they kind of enjoy it. They enjoy being there. They get some special insights. They probably shine in a couple of processions, and no one's invited back who doesn't really speak out and is sparky and, makes a name for themselves. You have to really impress. You can't just sit there quietly and not say anything and maybe take notes in the corner. You will never be asked back. You know, you have to be vocal and contribute. And I'm sure Wes Streeting will do well for himself. You know, he's a likeable man, you know, he's confident. Sure he will. But we shall see if he's asked back.
Yeah,
David Lammy was. He went 3 times, didn't he?
Oh, Lammy, yes, of course, yeah. And I wonder if Wes Streeting had any trouble getting in like David Lammy did back in Lisbon. That was hilarious. They wouldn't let him in. I mean, it just shows you what pay grade these politicians are.
Well, not without the lanyard. I mean, even Peter Thiel, yesterday, that's why he was so furious, because he'd forgotten his lanyard, and his bodyguard had to go ahead and say, you know, can you let my client in? He doesn't have his lanyard. And his client was Peter Thiel. So, yeah, you have to have that white ribboned lanyard to get in through the cordon.
So I think one of the useful things to have for the Bilderberg watchers and people taking pictures like yourself, Hannah, is a few lanyards in your pocket.
Yeah, use them. Loads of people with white lanyards turning up. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so whereabouts is a good place for people if they want to follow what's going on there? I mean, there usually are little leaks and things like that. I'm sure you would have told me if you've managed to get anything out of anyone.
Have we? No, it's all been... We haven't got any extra thing. I mean, you saw the footage with Dan Dix and Peter Thiel. He was completely monosyllabic, if that. And in Dresden, he was talking a little bit. So people are very quiet right now.
I think it's got more serious. I think it seems
to Eric Schmidt, he never said anything. Yeah, it's got more serious, especially today.
Yeah, as the Antichrist edges closer, maybe he's in there.
God. Maybe he is. I think he is in the form of AI. I mean, all the AI bosses are in there. The only person that isn't there is Sam Altman, and he has been twice before. But they're all in there. Google, DeepMind, you know, the Microsoft one, you know, they're all there. Anthropic. There's about 7 or 8 AI billionaires in there.
So I mean, we keep getting pushed this whole AI thing, don't we? I get rather fed up with it. I mean, we've just been told here in the UK that they're going to allow AI-controlled cars in a few months' time to start driving the roads. What do you think AI is really all about, Hannah?
That's a big question.
It is.
Tony.
It is a big question.
Is it peace and safety? Is it peace and safety? Is it the Antichrist? I don't know. AI is about everything. It's about every aspect of life. For Bilderberg this year, AI is about defense. It's AI deterrence and security. And actually, we had a very intimidating drone yesterday whizzing about over our heads, presumably with Palantir software. It's literally whizzing not very far above our heads, obviously taking biometric photos of us all. Yeah, for them it's defence. And by defence I mean, you know, weapons, war.
Killing, actually.
Drones.
Yeah. The kill chain.
Yeah, so they've got Palantir, but also Thiel just started up Anduril, and he was there this year, and the CEO of Anduril, and he was there 2 years ago. And they're working together with, Eric Schmidt was working with the Pentagon until quite recently with AI, his AI project. So, yeah, they've just repurposed it, and it's not about, improving the lot of humankind, but, yeah, they're just repurposing it for war. For them, AI is war.
Yeah, so I would imagine...
And surveillance, yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine
which
actually...
is a war on the population.
I mean, for me, the whole purpose of AI seems to be to extract the human from decision-making and to make it some sort of little bit of software that just makes the decisions instead. Because the humans have got a soul, they've got sometimes morals, And so we don't really want that. We would like to have a decision-making process that just dispenses with all that stuff. And we're being sold this basically as some sort of great thing, where actually there's something like $1 trillion a year going just into the research and development of AI, which could, of course, go into far more positive things. Anyway, look, Hannah, you've been absolutely fantastic telling us all about what's going on. Please, could you just let us know if people are interested in following all this, apart from going up. I set up a Bilderberg 25 Telegram channel, which people can post to, and I'm putting various stories, including the relationship with potential, anyway, with the weapons being developed by Bilderbergers being employed against the drones, obviously being employed against Iran, and these sort of weapon systems. So those are the people who are in there are going to make money from this. If this really kicks off, it's rather worrying to think that. Where is a good place would you suggest, to go follow stuff? And do you think there'll be anything in the UK London press about it?
Charlie Skelton usually covers it in The Guardian. I believe his piece will be out over the weekend. Search on Twitter for Bilderberg 2025. The pictures are coming out. They're coming out slowly. Dan Dick, Press for Truth, .ca is great. He's just uploaded a big report. But I think the pictures will be coming out in Twitter over the next few days, and also we'll be updating BilderbergMeetings.co.uk with some more pictures and a report of this year's conference. So, but you just need, Twitter is good. Your Telegram group is great. Giorgio Bombasse on Twitter is good. But right now we're just sort of desperately trying to get the pictures. We haven't uploaded as many as we could. But yeah. And there's always next year as well. And if anybody ever feels the urge for a foreign holiday, we will publicise it on bilderbergmeetings.co.uk and on Twitter, where the next location is, when it is, in plenty of time, so people can get cheap flights and come and join us. Because, it's a good place to meet like-minded people.
Yeah.
Anything that you get, any pictures, any quote, anything is useful, and it sort of expands our knowledge of this group and how they operate. And, it's a good place for us to network too. So I encourage people to come along next year when we publicise, when we find out where it is.
Well, one of the things we don't like to talk about too much is the fact that you often do find even Bilderberg participants, I mean, I have over the years anyway, do want to talk about it, even though they're told expressly not to. So they may chat to you off the record. And also there are officials, as I found over in Dresden, not the actual German police or anybody like that, but people who are involved with the press coverage that just want to come and tell you, right, this is happening, that's happening, this is happening. And so then we can all pass that around.
You're good at getting these confidences. But I remember in 2012 they always open up to you, Tony. That's why we need you to come more often.
Yeah.
But in 2014, Copenhagen, I remember, I think it was the CEO of North Hydro, obviously big energy company. And he was broken by it. And he was like, oh, my gosh. He goes, it was such hard work, so many meetings. Oh, it's just, he looked broken by it. He hated it, and he never was asked again. He really didn't like it. I think for some people, it's just they don't thrive in that horrible hothouse pressurised environment. And they're never asked again.
No, well, is Norsk Hydro privatised or nationalised?
I don't know.
If it's nationalised, I can understand why.
Really
listen, since you are telling that little tale, I could tell a tale of the Greek finance minister back in 2003 who came out for a packet of cigarettes. And actually, he really just wanted to talk to us about the horrors inside.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting.
It was so lovely.
Margaret Thatcher, they didn't like her, and they instigated a coup against her. And also John Smith, he went once, wanted to go back and tell them what they were doing wrong, didn't he, with the economy and their approach to finance, and never got the chance, did he?
No, because he died. No, he wanted to come back.
Sadly.
He wanted to come back with Brian Gould. He insisted, actually, look, we want a me and a proper financial person to tell you guys what's what. Oh dear, he died, and he never got to do that. And of course, Tony Blair jumped into his shoes, didn't he? But the Greek finance guy back in 2003 at Versailles was absolutely lovely bloke, and actually was shaking all of our hands. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. And he said that the atmosphere was horrible inside, absolutely horrible. Yeah. So, Peter Thiel, I mean, I honestly think, Hannah, we've both been covering this for quite a while now. They're on a hiding to nothing in there.
Yeah, I hope so.
They are. I mean, whatever happens...
They're pretty sure of themselves, Tony.
Well, they're plotting and planning death and destruction, but, at the end of the day... that is not going to come, I think, they will get much of their death and destruction, most likely, but their evil intentions are already being exposed. I think it was, wasn't it Dan Dix that said to Peter Thiel, he said the American people are waking up to what you're doing, Peter.
Right. And Peter Thiel just looks furious.
Even more furious.
I don't know, he's troubled.
He was even more furious than he was before at that point, which was unbelievable.
Poor old Peter. I shouldn't feel sorry for him, but he's not a happy bunny.
He isn't a happy bunny. He needs someone to love bomb him, I think. Anyway, look, Hannah Borno, thanks ever so much for joining us again from Stockholm.
Tony. Oh, I hope you're coming next year. You better do.
I hope so.
Can you pledge now on air? Okay.
Oh God! All right. Bless you. If I can afford it, I'd be there now. If I could afford it, Hannah, I promise you, I would. I'd love to. Yeah. Anyway.
We'll make it happen next year. All right.
We'll be following all your stuff over the weekend. Thanks ever so much for joining us.
Okay, take care. All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's obviously interesting to have a, horse's mouth discussion of what's going on in Stockholm. I think the real significance of Stockholm, as you both suggested, is that they've joined NATO. And, of course, there's just been this Ukrainian secret attack on Russian nuclear bases, an attempt to assassinate Putin, and the blowing up of the railways, bridges, which killed loads of people. I think that NATO are going for broke here. And I think they probably are thinking, well, what's going to happen next? Because it's not clear that they know exactly where they're going with all of this. It astonished me the other day, Tony. I was talking to my friend Diana, who's an academic professor in Liverpool University, and she didn't know that there'd been an assassination attempt on Putin.
Neither did Donald Trump.
Well, although in actual fact, no doubt we're going to come on to discuss that. Perhaps he did know, but that's another question.
Well, but perhaps he didn't. He didn't seem to know anyway.
No,
when he was confronted with it at a press conference, he was like, "What are you talking about?"
Yes, but he didn't seem to know.
So this is the way these things work, isn't it?
Well, it can be, but there's all sorts of other things floating around.
There's this thing called the deep state. Bilderberg actually represents that.
Yes, indeed, but also
Trump is not in that circle.
Well, Trump this today was saying, I told the Iranians that if they didn't do a deal with me after 60 days, nasty things would happen.
But we weren't talking about that, were we? We were talking about the assassination attempt on Putin.
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying that the question being asked all over the internet, Tony, is what did Trump know and when did he know it about all of these things?
We all know the US president is only told things, as the British Prime Minister is only told things when it's necessary. MI6 and the city, the financial and arms people, they control most of the narrative nowadays. They do,
but I think what it looks like to the Iranians is that Donald Trump has been a willing participant in disarming them before this attack by saying that
we weren't talking about that.
No, I know, but it's a question.
We were talking about Ukraine, and you've just completely
yes, I know,
shifted.
but I'm just pointing out the question. It doesn't know or not. So there are various theories about this.
They're different. Okay, so. The one thing that's fascinating about this attack on Iran last night is the use of these container drones. So this is exactly the same tactic. Yes. The Ukrainians have used these. So are the Ukrainians and the Israelis working together, or is somebody else supplying these nice little containers full of drones?
You know who's behind these container drones? It's the British military and security services.
Is it?
They're the ones in Ukraine, certainly. Now, of course, they cooperate with the Israelis as well. We're actually training Israeli soldiers
here in Britain
at this very moment. Yes.
Even though we're voting, isn't it bizarre? We voted last night. The British ambassador voted for the ceasefire, but at the same time, we're still training IDF soldiers. I mean, I think I ought to put a link up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk to, I think, is it Declassified?
Yes.
I'm not sure who it was that reported that, showed that that's taking place, picked up by some of the other newspapers as well. But anyway, this is, I looked at this, first of all, this spat between Musk, as we were saying last week, and Trump as a way of him sort of cocking a snook, the deep state and the tech giants cocking a snook at Trump, particularly for his attempt to slow down the war and have peace with the Russians, alleged attempt anyway, which has completely failed because it looks as if it's the Europeans that are really pushing this war, plus their friends in the US deep state. But the connection between the Bilderbergers and the attack on Iran is another one. And this is all happening last night. All these Bilderbergers arrive and we see the attack on Iran taking place. It may even have been that the announcement was told to Trump, it's going to be 60 days, and that this is something that you can imagine the senior Bilderbergers on the steering committee, they're all cock-a-hoop. They're going to make loads more money if there's a big war in the Middle East between Iran and Israel.
Well, Alex Karp is on the record as being absolutely pro-Israeli. I mean, we had a quote from him the other week. You had a clip from him, didn't we? Where he was going on about, anybody who's in favour of Palestine just supports Hamas and all the rest of it.
And terrorists.
The tech billionaires are absolutely embedded with the Israeli armed forces, as our own armed forces. Yeah. So what we've got here is it's either that there's two things going on. The state in Britain has got two hands to it. Some people know something, other people know nothing. It's increasingly becoming clear to both the Russians and the Iranians that this is a nice cop, nasty cop routine. So Trump pretends he doesn't know what's going on. And same with Starmer and Streeting and all the rest of it. They do know what's going on. And of course,
I'm not sure they're in the loop.
I think this is the jury is out on this, Tony.
I think Bilderberg is in the loop, though.
Yes, the jury is out on this, whether they're deliberately misleading the other side.
I mean, let's just read through.
Both the Russians and the Iranians will be absolutely foolish to believe anything they say.
The list of the Bilderberg steering committee. These are because there are some Brits on there, aren't there? In fact, one of them is. It's the right piece of paper.
You mean the John Sawyer's?
John's ex-boss of MI6. He's steering
head of MI6.
So he's sitting there setting the agenda. He's sitting there deciding who to invite. And, of course, he's in a position with the financial people and the media people, also on the steering committee and on Bilderberg, to give the positive or negative press coverage that certain events and individuals need.
That's right. So what coordinates the relationship between the big money guys and the military is the intelligence services. I don't see any Russian intelligence people on here at all.
Well, there's only the NATO
they're just
countries.
Not on there, are they?
There is a Russian, apparently a guy who spends most of his time in Russia, but he's from the Carnegie Endowment.
Well, that's right. So, in other words, this is very much the in-house meeting of NATO.
And these foundations, they also play a role, don't they? You made a fantastic point a few weeks ago about the oligarchs we talk about, actually the philanthropists. And that's what Carnegie is. These are people with massive amounts of private wealth that call themselves charities, but they are particular. I mean, they're in there. They're in the Bilderberg right now.
Yes, and of course the whole idea is we don't need taxes. We were talking about taxes earlier, taxes and spending. We don't need taxes because all these billionaires are going to create foundations which will pursue social goals, and therefore we don't need any governments. Yeah, this is where this is all going. We're going to get rid of the boring old democratic state, and we're just going to have corporations run on corporate lines, where the people in charge are the people in charge, and everybody else has just got to do as they're told. That's the efficient way to run things, Tony. Surely.
Well, I mean, I talked a bit last week about the links between the Nazis and the Bilderbergers. Certainly, it seems to me to be a financial kind of Fourth Reich organisation, particularly when for the first 20 years, Martin, it was chaired by a former SS officer.
Well, that's right. I mean, the history of Bilderberg, which you have researched in detail, it was essentially set up to be the bridge between the former Nazis in Germany, who are being rehabilitated, like Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who is also implicated in betraying the Allied cause at Arnhem, which you've written a book about, and the Anglo-Zionist elites. So this is the people who are behind a lot of what goes on. Of course, even though there's a conspiracy, it doesn't mean they always get their own way. You know, things go wrong, even to, you know, the best laid plans and all the rest of it. But this is definitely what this is all about and has been all along.
A lot of Bilderberg seems to be focused on seeing Russia as the big bad guy. Why is that, do you think?
Well, because it's, as you say, it's NATO that are behind all of this, and Russia, when Yeltsin was in charge, they were quite happy to have Russians come along, and even Putin, when he first took over, because he was keeping Zyganov and the communists out, they were quite happy to talk to him. But since he's started to get rather independent-minded, you know, they lust after the wealth of Siberia, and they want it for them. They don't want it for the Russians. But the Russians, to their credit, aren't going to let them have it.
The Russians have also been sticking their finger in Syria, haven't they, over the last few decades?
Well, they've been doing stuff. They've been doing stuff all over the place. I mean, Russia is a big country with a lot global reach.
But it seems the Russians have decided, okay, Syria's going to have to go. We're more interested in sorting things out in Ukraine than.
Well, I think the thing is that the decisions made by the Russian general staff about these things, Tony, will be based upon information which we don't have. Okay, they're also supporting these revolutionary governments which have emerged in West Africa. Traoré in Burkina Faso, for example, who's a spiritual descendant of Thomas Sankara, who was assassinated by the French in the 1980s. And the Russians and the Chinese are working all over the world to frustrate the Western imperialist setup. And Bilderberg is the Western imperialist setup. Yeah. That's what they're trying to subvert.
Okay, so I was rather shocked and amazed to hear this bit of news about the Israelis attacking Iran last night. It looks like the response has been fairly muted with just a drone response. But the run-up to it was very interesting, wasn't it? This whole business of with Benjamin Netanyahu facing possible re-election with the Knesset dissolving parliament. I mean, this is putting pressure on him to actually ramp up the war, isn't it?
Yes, that's true, but I don't think it's just to do with Netanyahu's personal salvation. This is obviously a very carefully put together long-term plan. And what's happened is that the Iranians have been very foolish by talking to the Americans in the way they did. They presumed that as long as they carried on talking, they wouldn't be attacked. And of course, it's been demonstrated to them. The same is happening in Russia. People in Russia are concluding, both political elites and the ordinary people, that there's no point talking to the West because they deliberately deceive. They did it in Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. The Iranians have been trying to sort of avoid war here by talking, and their top people have all been murdered. Just like the same thing happened with Yahya Sinwar from Hamas and the Hezbollah chief Nasrallah. So it's it's very dangerous to talk to the West and try and do deals with them. And I think the downside for the West going forward is nobody will talk to them because it's a death sentence. So we're not going to talk to you anymore. And of course, they are within their rights to fight back. We've got a whole a death list here. Yeah. There's a death list here for somebody. Maybe the Iranians. This is the list of people at Bilderberg. Alex Karp, for example, who spoke out about his support for Israel the other day.
And he said that everybody that my Palantir software is killing is a terrorist.
That's right. That's right. Or maybe he'll get his wish.
Maybe he'll get some
maybe some terrorists will find him.
Blowback.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we leave the subject of Bilderberg, we all love Dan Dix. He's one of the most lovely chaps you could ever meet. I met him several times at these Bilderberg meetings. I had a right laugh at the recent one in Lisbon with him. And so here he is chasing Peter Thiel. We were hearing a little bit from Hannah about that earlier on. He managed to catch him yesterday, chasing him down the road. And Peter Thiel, this really, really stony face on him. I mean, he's got a kind of pockmark, cocaine-y type face anyway, but he was looking extremely angry and upset. This is the guy who's behind PayPal. He financed Palantir. He's financed Facebook originally as well. So he's a bit of a dark financial tech guy. But here's Dan spotting him trotting over to him and chasing him down the road, asking him a few questions. Peter Thiel and Dan Dix yesterday in Stockholm.
Mr. Thiel, do you have any comments about Palantir's surveillance of the American people, sir? Or any of your connections to Jeffrey Epstein? You're setting up a Big Brother surveillance system, and people know it, sir. Do you think the American people want this surveillance tech being used against them? You're meeting with them. People are waking up to what you're doing there, sir. That's why we're here covering this. Wow, Peter Thiel was booking it. That man picked up the pace. The second the word Epstein came out, it seemed he started getting a little faster. Stone cold Peter Thiel, of course, co-founded Palantir with Alex Karp, who is still here. And these are the guys who are setting up the Big Brother surveillance system, essentially to track, trace, and database everyone. Not just Americans, you may have heard me say that, but literally everyone. And that's a big reason part of the reason why he is here. There is a lot of heavy kind of tech representation here and military men who are preparing for something.
So that's Dan Dix there. You can follow him on his pressfortruth.ca, press FOR, truth, as he pointed out to me yesterday, not the number 4, .ca, and also on all sorts of different social media. He makes a point of listing all of the different things like Rumble, Odyssey, but not YouTube, Martin, as the YouTube people are in there. And they've cancelled his channel a couple of times. But he says at the end there, enigmatically, they're preparing for something.
Well, I think what they're preparing for is already in operation, isn't it? What's happened in the last couple of weeks in Iran and Russia is the worst end of what people were predicting might happen in both cases. And no doubt some people in there know exactly what's happening because they were behind it.
The annoying thing about all of this is, of course, it's being supported by the so-called democratic West.
What is being supported by the Democratic West?
Well, whatever they're up to. The war in the Middle East.
The so-called Democratic West is exactly what it is. And, of course, what we're seeing here is the end of 500 years of Western domination of the world system.
But they're not going down without a fight.
They're not going down without a fight. That's absolutely right.
So the other thing that Dan noticed was right next door to this great big hotel is also the Grand Lodge of Swedish Freemasonry, which he spotted.
The Grand Lodge of Freemasonry for Sweden. You'll see some of the symbols on the window there, the classic checkerboard floor. It almost looks like an eye in a triangle and the Red Cross. This is, again, the main lodge of Freemasonry directly across the street from the Bilderberg Hotel. And, you know, I find it interesting because there's a lot of similarities between both the Freemasons and the Bilderberg group, in the sense that within Freemasonry, the lower degrees are not privy to some of the information that's revealed when you work your way up in Freemasonry. The lower levels are referred to as the outer core or the outer portico, and the true info in regards to what happens with Freemasonry is reserved for the adepts, they say. And very much like Bilderberg, there too is an inner circle within the inner circle, much like Freemasonry. And here we are, just right across the street from the Bilderberg Hotel is the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry here in Sweden. So I find it pretty interesting that it's adjacent and that interesting correlation there. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, guys. Crazy stuff. When did the Bilderberg start publishing the agenda list and meeting? That's been going on for a while?
It's been going on for at least, I think, 10, 15 years or so.
Didn't they used to have press conferences in the 60s?
I think later, late 90s.
Interesting. So that's basically a press spokesperson from the Bilderberg meeting.
Yeah, who just lied to Dan, as he managed to get one of the press spokespeople for PR officers for Bilderberg, who was saying, oh yeah, we used to hold press conferences in the 90s. Actually, that's a total lie. They never did. And they did hold press conferences was back in the 1960s and 1970s sometimes. But when the press had noticed that they were there, and if they got press inquiries, they would sometimes hold a press conference. I remember seeing some statements by Henry Kissinger, and I think it was maybe the Norwegian Prime Minister possibly speaking at a press conference, reported in one of the papers as if it was normal. But then when C. Gordon Tether at the Financial Times he started writing about it in his Lombard column, he was from right the way through the 1960s and 70s and into the 80s one of the most famous and loved columns in the FT. He was sacked, Martin, as soon as he mentioned the Bilderbergs. He was told, no, we're not printing that, and if you insist, then you can leave, and he did.
Well, we've been discussing this all night. If you want to have a career inside the system, you've got to go along with what the system expects. Otherwise, they're not going to employ you. And sometimes people are brave enough to take a risk and say what they want to say, but of course they will then not necessarily run with the piece. So you'll be out, but you won't get it. You won't get it out there, not through conventional means.
We're going to leave it tonight looking at the nuclear deterrent of Israel, as they say, the nuclear so-called bombs. They don't like to admitting that they've got these nuclear weapons, Martin, do they?
Well, if they admitted it, they would immediately come under the Logan Act, and there would be automatic sanctions on them.
They have admitted it, actually, but nothing seems to have happened.
No, it doesn't matter, does it? They get away with it.
Todd Rider, yes, him, the US researcher and scientist, ex of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has come up with another one of his wonderful films about the Germans inventing nuclear weapons and testing nuclear weapons in 1944, before the beginning of the war. So when the Israelis want to fire one of their nukes out of a submarine, they can remember that this is a technology invented by Hitler.
Let's move on to sub-launched ballistic missiles, not cruise missiles. And here were launches as early as 1942 of rockets from a submarine that was underwater. So this almost looks like the modern launch of a Polaris or Trident missile or something. But this was a smaller missile launched from a submarine underwater in 1942. This was done in collaboration with engineers from Peenemünde, the rocket base. And once they had demonstrated this with small rockets, they started doing it with larger and larger rockets. And there was enough Allied surveillance and bombing on the Baltic coast that they switched over to Austria, a large lake in the middle of nowhere in Austria. And they were building larger and larger sub-launch missiles and demonstrating them in Austria. Then the ultimate would be if you could deliver a sub-launched V2 or A4 rocket, a very large rocket with a fairly large payload. Now that type of rocket is too large to fit into any of the wartime submarines that they had. So they developed a solution. A German submarine would tow a submarine trailer, and this trailer would initially be horizontal, be towed across the Atlantic, and the trailer would contain one of these V2 or A4 rockets. And then once they got off the coast of their target, they would flood one end of this trailer, that end would sink. Now the rocket would be upright, they'd open the doors and launch it. If you read the history books, officially this was purely a paper design, never got anywhere, never seriously contemplated. But here is documentation from one of the modern German U-boat museums saying that, oh yeah, during the war in 1944, they actually built these things, and they were successfully doing trials to see how well a submarine could tow these things. So it was actually built. Here is additional evidence. This is from the French, who were also investigating German technologies after the war. So a French investigator after the war wrote about some of his discoveries, what the Germans had been doing during the war, including a submarine capable of launching V2s. It was actually built, and that the Germans planned to use that to get off the coast and to bomb American cities, including Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Charleston. And that they planned to do this with atomic bombs. These amphibious V-2s would carry atomic bombs. They planned to do this in conjunction with launching rockets from Europe at the United States. And according to this French investigator, Germany would have done this beginning in June 1945 if the war had not ended just when it did.
So that's Dr. Todd Rider. Quite an amazing discovery coming across his stuff, because it is hidden. It's called Hidden Histories, the channel, but there's almost nothing in the metadata or the headline of the video in order to where you wouldn't find it unless you knew. So I will put the link to that full interview there up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk. We really do have to download the MP4, the video file, because all of the evidence, the documents, etc., are there up on the screen for you to see. From, for example, the document from the German Submarine Museum that shows that these things were not just a paper design, Martin. They were really tested in World War II. The Nazis were way ahead on this, and really all the Manhattan Project were doing was sticking a new label on the Nazi technology for the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and on Nagasaki.
So, in other words, your thesis that elements within the Nazi regime had done an underground deal with the Western powers at Bilderberg, or rather, as a result of what happened at Arnhem, and of course Bilderberg was at Oosterbeek, which is where the Polish paratroops were surrounded. Yeah, that was Arnhem, the castle for them. It starts to put a different pattern of the whole of history, doesn't it? And of course they were then planning to attack the Soviet Union with these nuclear weapons. They didn't do it, and Klaus Fuchs, who was based here and also part of the Manhattan Project, he was a refugee from Nazi Germany. He'd left in 1933, and he was a physicist. He worked on all of this stuff, and he was the one, or him and others, who made sure that the Soviets had access to all of this material so they could produce their own bomb, and that would settle things down. Maybe we wouldn't be facing this problem now if Iran had a nuclear bomb. They wouldn't dare to do what they're doing. Britain could give us, we could give our nuclear bombs to Iran because we don't need them.
Maybe the Iranians do have nuclear.
Well, if they had them, they'd have said so.
As you and I know, in the 1990s, it was possible to buy Russian nuclear weapons on the black market. Right. Roger Cook proved that you could get weapons-grade plutonium. Not only that, an SS-20 was offered.
Yes, okay.
And they lifted up the tarpaulin on it, and there it was. Yeah, we can do a deal. You can buy one of these.
Yes, well, the Iranians have always had the capability of producing nuclear weapons. They've decided not to. Inside the Iranian elite, there are now people going to be saying that was foolish of us. Yeah. Because if we developed a nuclear bomb, they wouldn't be talking to us like this. They'd be much more polite.
They say that mutually assured destruction kept the peace right the way through the Cold War, don't
That's right, but it's only when we've got the weaponry. See, if other people... see, because we don't threaten people. The Americans have threatened several times to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. They threatened the North Koreans, and they threatened the North Vietnamese.
Yeah, and it's becoming increasingly clear that Ukraine is Israel. They're both basically...
Well, they're all part of the Western system, aren't they?
Is Bilderberg. So no wonder Peter Thiel was, looking a little bit down, a little bit kind of troubled. So, Ode, Bilderberg Syndrome, 71 Trilateral Street. From Patricia, her poem this week, Old Goats of Bloat, Big Shots, all who think they rule our lives, 'tis true, on private jets, 2 fingers see, to CO2, climate, tee-hee. A shindig every year we'll meet in limos black, trilateral fleet. Bilderbergers, Actus Reus, a gilded cage of fat cat players, an evil cult knee, Zionism, pray one day each will end in prison. Wallenbergs, Thiel, Schmidt and Co., Mentes Reu, come to know. Each year they push and shove and hope what they say may be of note. No room for God or faith, the clue, but steal and cheat and wars can do. A tawdry world, playground of hell, Bilderberg, a cult, a spell. Attendees see at altar kneel. With Bilderberg perhaps they feel untouchable, omnipotent, as lives destroy and circumvent. Such wealth and power, a heady spell, each psychopath we now know well. A hierarchy, a bad boys club, with ease to squeeze, damnation rub. Palantir, our currencies, jabs AI, security. World War III, fake revelations, divvy up the world and nations. Syndrome, Stockholm, Temptation Street, where